Alright, baby, let's go out there and piss some people off. Is that not the best kind of video to go out there and make? So, we're referring to a tweet made by Marie on Twitter that goes out there and cites some comments made by Nick Kypreos a few days ago. I think this was on the Kipper and Bourne show. I'm making a reasonable assumption there. If anybody can find the actual source, then hey, please let me know in the comments. But it's a very simple tweet that Marie goes out there and posts up. It talks about how Nick Kypreos thinks that if the Toronto Maple Leafs wanted to skip a bridge deal and go straight to a long-term extension, forward Matthew Knies would want the Slafkovsky extension. $7.6 million by 8 years. Now, let's just dive into the numbers right now, shall we? Matthew Knies is 22 years old, 6'3", 227 left-handed guy who is signed on till the end of this season on his entry-level contract. Drafted in 2021, he was a second-round guy who eventually showed off extraordinarily well in his Draft Plus 1 years and beyond. Last year, he had 35 points in 80 games with the Toronto Maple Leafs as a rookie. This season, he's got half a point a game, 4 points in 8 games with 3 goals. So on pace for about 41 points and 30 goals. Does he hit 30 goals this year? Who really knows? But at the end of the day, Matthew Knies has been a pretty usable and very relied upon member of the Toronto Maple Leafs forward core. Even throughout some of the games that the Maple Leafs have been losing, he is still finding ways to put up points on the board. He had a goal in the 6-2 loss against Columbus and an assist in that 4-1 stomping at the hands of the Rangers, all while playing a max of 20 minutes and a low of about 14 minutes. And of course, when you consider the current trajectory of the Toronto Maple Leafs, everybody in Toronto is panicking about the past 2 games. The 6-2 loss at the hands of the Blue Jackets was terrible, and then the 5-1 loss against the St. Louis Blues was debatably even worse. Matthew Knies posted up back-to-back -3 performances in those games, but he still was able to produce some points. At the end of the day, though, Knies has been one of many Toronto Maple Leafs that has been under the heat right now because the team has stopped playing good hockey. All Toronto Maple Leafs talk aside and just focusing on Knies, he is still only 22 years old, so there is a lot of time for him to grow and develop and become better and just kind of round out the rest of his NHL game. I mean, it is his second season after all, so while he is on pace for more points than he had last year, a sophomore slump still is very reasonably within the cards here. So, when you talk about what an extension could look like for Matthew Knies, the Juraj Slafkovsky number is one that's getting brought up here by Nick Kypreos. Slav is 20 years old, 6'3", 238 left-handed guy signed till the end of 2033, on a dollar amount of $7.6 million that kicks in 2025-2026. This contract extension was signed a few months ago, and it was for a very long time into the future. His contract doesn't even kick in till 2025. Right now, Slafkovsky is a point-per-game guy, on pace for, of course, 82 points in 81 games played, but the crazy part about it is, Slafkovsky and the rest of the first line, they haven't even really been playing all too well this season. Nick Suzuki has been looking slow and kind of unconditioned, Cole Caulfield is scoring the lights out, which is great to see, and Slafkovsky, of course, is a point per game too. But the first line just has not meshed and gelled as well as Canadiens fans expected out of them, especially at the beginning stages of this season. So while Slafkovsky is at a point per game, it's kind of crazy because you're like, hey, he could realistically be playing better and maybe even producing even more points. So when you think about it, yeah, of course this guy got paid $7.6 million a year. He's younger than Matthew Knies. He also produced more points last year than Matthew Knies. He is also a more relied upon player than Matthew Knies. So now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, the only similarities I could bring up between Knies and Slafkovsky might just be the physical tools. These guys are both bigger guys who have made their livings being a little bit more of a force out there than some of the smaller players like Marner or Cole Caulfield, for example. These guys have physical tools and they're not afraid to use them. I'd say Matthew Knies has a little bit more bite than Juraj Slafkovsky does, especially on the forecheck and on the boards in the offensive zone, but I do think Slafkovsky is a little bit of a better passer and maybe more of a cerebral player without the puck. They're different player types, but similar enough to make this comparison. But at the end of the day, Juraj Slafkovsky's making 7.6 because he had 50 points last year, and he's on pace for a point-per-game year this year while still not playing his best, all at 20 years old. Matthew Knies wanting some sort of a Juraj Slafkovsky deal at $7.6 million is ludicrous, because in my opinion, he hasn't earned that dollar amount. You could say, oh, if you wanted to think about Knies versus Slafkovsky, of course, Slafkovsky is the better player, but maybe he just signed a cheap deal. Maybe the Toronto Maple Leafs would give Knies 7.6 because it's more reasonable to assume that with the cap going up and with the Toronto Maple Leafs forward core already getting the dollar amounts that they have, Knies would fit into this puzzle with a 7.6 AAV dollar amount because Toronto is Toronto and it's not Montreal that's signing him. If that's the case, then that is such a crazy and ridiculous way to assess this contract situation. Because Toronto has already been in a spot to overpay guys in the past, the Marners, the Matthewses, and the Nylanders, and then the Tavareses, you have this standard set in this organization that overpaying for guys is okay. So now, Nick Kypreos is reporting that Matthew Knies would want a similar contract to a guy who's 2 years younger, who is better, who has pedigree of being the first overall pick in the 2022 NHL Entry Draft, and who has had a better career up until this point. I get that Matthew Knies was a really good come-out-of-nowhere story, a second-round guy in 2021 who kind of came out of the shadows. People were surprised the Maple Leafs took Knies initially in 2021's second round, and people were questioning, hey, what's the deal? Who is this guy? Why'd the Leafs get him? And then immediately after, he played well in the NCAA, and a lot of people started getting on the bandwagon. That's fine, but is it enough to take that hype into the NHL, have a pretty okay rookie season, and then all of a sudden the next season say, hey, I want the same amount of money as a guy who's younger and who produced more points than me and who's a first-line guy? Is Knies really that good? I don't know about that, man. Maybe long-term, there's a world where Matthew Knies is able to be more valuable than Juraj Slafkovsky. Maybe he's a little bit more physical. Maybe he gets the same amount of points playing with Matthews and Marner or Nylander or whomever else. Maybe it's possible, but right now, I wouldn't say so. And to see Knies being in a position to demand a contract that is in the Slafkovsky territory just screams to me that the standard of the Toronto Maple Leafs and their financial model is really setting things up in a negative way. And I wanted to go out there and read some of the replies to this tweet made on Twitter. People don't want to admit it, but Nick Kypreos actually has been right a lot of the time when he calls actual numbers in Leafs player negotiations. You can bet your behind Matthew Knies and his camp will try to pull every dollar from the Leafs. He knows how valuable he is and what a unicorn he is to Toronto. Now, okay, I can understand that Matthew Knies brings an element to this Leafs team that you can't really find out of Matthews, you can't really find that out of Marner. Maybe a little bit of that tenacity is there in Nylander, but still, Knies is a unique enough player that he can warrant a lot of money because of what he brings to the Maple Leafs. But 7.6? To compare it to Juraj Slafkovsky and say, hey, I want to be that guy. I don't know about that. I think maybe Slafkovsky's deal is just so cheap and so good because he could become a lot better. He could be an 80-point guy consistently as a top-of-the-line power forward passer playmaker for the Montreal Canadiens long-term. Maybe that's kind of what's tripping me up here because I think of Slafkovsky as a much superior player long-term and in the now compared to Knies. So thinking about the dollar amounts, I mean, to be honest, I do think that the Slafkovsky deal is pretty much a steal, especially since it goes on for such a long time and it doesn't start until next year. So maybe that's the lens that I'm attacking this idea from, and it's why it sounds so weird to me, so foreign to me that Knies would be in the same financial category as Slafkovsky. Not to deny the value that he brings to the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's just Slafkovsky is the better player. So I don't know. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree? Disagree? Do you think this is even something worth talking about? Knies wanting the Slafkovsky deal? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below if you're a Canadiens fan or a Maple Leafs fan. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.